What's good, YouTube? It's Justice I Used to Be Paying. Today I'm back with another video. And in this video, I'm going to be raising the question of does Future need to mature? But before I get into that, make sure you leave a like, comment, and subscribe. Do all those things. It helps me out a ton. Future has been one of the most consistent and dominant figures in rap since the early 2010s. No one has given us more hits, club bangers, albums, mixtapes, features, and pretty much anything else in terms of new music than Future since his mainstream debut, including in 2024, where he dropped 3 full-length projects: We Don't Trust You, We Still Don't Trust You, and Mixtape Pluto. So we continue to move into the future, no pun intended, and it doesn't feel like the end of Future's career is anywhere soon. It doesn't feel like he's coming to the end. It feels like, if anything, he's honestly picking up momentum, but at the same time, he is getting older, and he's already 41 years of age, so I think that it raises a fairly interesting question to be asked, and that is, does Future need to mature in his music? I bring this question up because evolution is talked about a lot in rap, whether that's lyrically or sonically. People praise Kanye West for his ability to evolve over the years and constantly be changing lyrically, sonically. People have praised somebody like Jay-Z for his ability to evolve his lyrics as he changed the places that he was in at that certain time in his life when he's making the music. But Future has remained pretty much the same since he's made his pretty much mainstream debut. If you listen to the lyrics, the topics of his songs haven't really diverted much from the original path of like super toxicity in terms of his relationships and drug abuse, turn up, flexing music. Like, he hasn't really diverted much from the program too much. He's been pretty much like the undisputed king of club music for like the last 15 years or so now. But even if you look at where Future is in terms of like his standing in like pop culture as just like a figure, not even just as a rapper in terms of what he's actually making musically or he's actually saying in his lyrics, he's pretty much remained the same. He's been, the turn-up guy, the cool guy who has a whole bunch of women and, raps about infidelity and all that stuff. He's kind of like a bastion of like the toxic male lover boy archetype, and that hasn't really changed in his entire career. Rap is seen as a young man's genre, both in terms of the people listening to it and the people making it, and Future just isn't that anymore. Yet at the same time, he still gets grouped in with a lot of these young artists. When you talk about people who make, some of the best trap music, some of the best turn up music, some of the best club music, or anything of the sort, Future is kind of put into the same category as guys like Lil Baby, Gunna, 21 Savage. Like, he's grouped in with these younger guys, even though he came up way before these dudes. They all came up 5, 6, 7 years after Future was already a household name. And even if you look at other people who are considered like his counterparts, like a Playboi Carti, a Lil Uzi, a Travis Scott, again, he came up way before them. And honestly, a lot of the stuff that they do is heavily inspired by Future. So he kind of exists in this very unique lane where he's kind of like the elder statesman, but he doesn't really feel like it. Like, obviously, there are other 40-year-old rappers. Future's not the only 40-year-old rapper, but he's the only one that entertains that lane that is like very specifically still for young people. Like, very young people. Future's the only 40-year-old rapper who's consistently getting played in the club like he's one of the 20-year-old rappers. And I think that that makes him kind of like a weird enigma in the hip-hop space. And at the same time, he's still rapping about very similar topics as the other guys who are in this space. A common complaint about modern-day Drake and his music is that a lot of people feel like Drake hasn't evolved lyrically. Like, they don't feel like he's grown up as the years have gone on. They still feel like he's rapping as if he's this 23-year-old who's in the club, heartbroken over the girl that doesn't want him, still trying to find some other girls, but still talking to the ex-girl. Like, they feel like Drake hasn't really moved. He's been kind of frozen in time. But if we're just talking about age and evolving and, needing to, I guess, upgrade your lyrics to match your age, Future's way worse than Drake, because Future, again, is 40 years old and he has like 10 kids. Like, some of his kids are like above the age of 18. I'm pretty sure at least one of them is above the age of 18. So realistically, if we're going to frame this in probably like the worst way we can possibly, just for the sake of the video, Future is somebody who's possibly not that far away from being a grandpa, realistically. Like, if his kid has a kid in like 2-3 years, that's not that crazy. So he's not that far away from being a grandfather, but he still raps about, toxicity in his relationships and, dogging women out, cheating on women. He still talks about, being in the club, turning up, popping bottles, all that. He still talks about being hooked on prescription drugs like he's 21 years old. Now, Future's still a rapper at the end of the day, so it's not as weird. But if like you were to put this in the context of just like a regular 41-year-old man who was still talking about, getting a whole bunch of women and being hooked on drugs and how amazing they feel and popping bottles in the club. If this was just like, maybe like your uncle or like a coworker, you'd be like, I don't know, that's kind of weird. Like you might need to grow up a little bit. But it's a rapper, so, where do we draw the line? Where are we in terms of being like, all right, Future, you kind of gotta move on from this stuff. Future does rap about, pretty generic rapper topics. If you're just looking at like the most basic way you can describe songs, money, women, drugs, pretty basic, right? But I think Future actually is very underappreciated as a lyricist. And I know that might sound kind of crazy if you don't really listen to a whole bunch of Future and you just hear, his biggest songs or the songs on the radio or, the songs on TikTok. And I understand that his biggest stuff sometimes can be very repetitive and very simplified. But there's a reason why Future has been able to stay for as long as he has. There's a reason why when there's a whole new cycle of club music guys, a whole new cycle of mainstream guys, Future's always there and he's always consistent. It's not just because, I don't know, they just keep listening to Future just because. Future's able to evoke emotion from the people listening to his music, and he does it very well. There's a reason why he has the reputation of, a womanizer, toxic relationship, that type of music where you listen to it when you're heartbroken or you just, you dogged a girl out or, you talk about cheating on a girl on Twitter and somebody posts a picture of Future. There's a reason why he has this reputation more than any other rapper, because there are so many rappers who rap about dogging women and cheating on them and doing this, and I'm in 3 relationships with 3 women. Like, Future's not the only one that raps about this stuff, but he's one of the only ones that's really good at evoking emotion and really making you feel something in the music. His lyrics are very good at making you feel something. When you listen to a song like a Wait For You, My Savages, songs like Codeine Crazy, he has a whole bunch of songs, Love You Better, like he has a whole bunch of songs where, yeah, they sound good, he's doing his flows and stuff, he's got a very catchy hook, but he's able to evoke emotion, and that's what really separates him. Because in the class that he's in, at least in my opinion, that turn-up rapper club music class that he's in, that he's been in for his entire career, he's one of the only guys that really makes people feel something. And I think that's part of the reason why he's able to have the staying power that he does in a class of hip hop that doesn't typically have a lot of staying power. Guys that are in Future's lane typically don't last a decade still being super relevant, even to this new audience of people who are rising up and becoming of age during this new time period. Normally, they pretty much age out with the audience that they started with. If I'm, rapping in 2005 and you're 20 in 2005 and I'm rapping about money and women and drugs, by the time we get to 2015 and I'm still rapping about that, you might still be listening, but the kids that are now 25 that were 15 back then probably aren't going to be listening to me. And that's something that Future has. Or a song like Use Me, like Future is just able to get people to relate to what he's saying in a way that doesn't really happen in the space that he occupies, even if what he's talking about is extremely emotionally immature for someone his age. What Future is doing in terms of his age and longevity is very rarefied air in rap. Very few people have been able to stay for as long as Future has and be as relevant as Future has. It's a handful of guys, Drake, Jay-Z, Nas, Nicki, Wayne, a few others here and there. I know I'm missing some names, but for the most part, it's not something that's done very often. A 15-year career where you're still in the mainstream as an artist every single year. It's not like you're just kind of on the back burner doing your own thing. You're dropping music, but like you're not really relevant to the modern day hip hop space. There's only a few guys who can really claim that they've been able to do that. And the first 2 that really were able to do this were Jay-Z and Nas, at least in my opinion, have this 15-year long career where they're still extremely relevant to the modern hip-hop audience the entire time. And those 2 rappers are 2 amazing and legendary lyricists. And so in my opinion, their longevity kind of set the standard of what longevity in a rapper is supposed to look like in terms of relevance, right? Because Jay-Z and Nas, they kind of, as they aged and they evolved with their music, they brought their lyrics up with them. They brought their lyrics up with them from the beginning all the way to where they are today, or I guess the end for Jay-Z because he hasn't dropped in a while, right? They took their lyrics up with them as they rose in status and especially in wealth in the case of Jay-Z. And so that intended original audience that they first had when they started their career has followed them all the way to where they are today. If I was a Jay-Z fan in 1996 and I was 20, let's just say, all the way up until today, I've been able to follow his career. And as I go through my own stepping up, hopefully, right? We all hope we go up in life as we get older. As I go through this phases of my life and start rising and rising, so has Jay-Z's music. So at the end of the day, the original intended audience has stayed the same. I don't mean in terms of like the age bracket, right? If Jay-Z was rapping for 18 to 25 in 1996, those people are now, 40 to 50, right? So that intended audience has stayed the same. The age group has changed. The people have obviously aged up, but that audience that they had in the beginning for Nas and Jay-Z continued to go up with them because so did their music. Their music became more mature. Their music became more about status and family and business and stuff rather than the stuff that they were rapping about 15, 20 years ago. Three rappers, though, really came in and kind of broke this mold of still keeping that same audience and just dragging them along with you, and that was Drake, Nicki, and Wayne. If you were, let's just say, 12 years old in 2016, the odds of you becoming a Jay-Z fan because of the new music he was dropping around that era probably wasn't very high. I mean, of course, you can go back and listen to old Jay-Z and become a fan, but if you're just 12 years old listening to whatever you're listening to in 2016 and some new Jay-Z comes on, odds are you're not going to become a fan right away or like be like, oh man, this guy's making music for me. That's probably not the feeling you're going to get. While on the other hand, in 2024, if you're 12 years old and you hear some new Kanye music, there's a very good chance you become a new Kanye fan off of the new music, not even having to go back and listening to all the old stuff. Drake, Nicki, and Kanye all still kind of target younger audience in their music and are able to create new and younger fans. Now, whether you think that's a good thing or a bad thing, I guess is your opinion, but at the end of the day, they kind of broke the mold of just dragging your original audience along with you all the way up until the end of your career. I think Eminem is somebody who's done that as well. He still has a massive audience, but it's really just him bringing his fans with him. While on the other hand, Drake, Nicki, and Kanye are still attracting newer and younger fans every single year. And Future is somebody who exists in that space as well. Future is still constantly getting newer and younger fans. These new teenagers are becoming Future fans alongside listening to Ken Carson, Destroy Lonely. They're listening to Future as well, the new Future music. So Future is creating fans that are younger than some of his kids. Like he has a fan base that is not only keeping the older fans, but it's adding in on all these young fans. Like the age demographic that would typically be targeted in a Future song has not changed. Some of the people have gotten older and they're still fans, but that original demographic of fans that is being targeted by Future's music has not changed. Just the people that exist in that demographic are now new people. It's a new cycle of people, but they're still becoming Future fans. Future in 2024 dropped 3 albums, and in my opinion, the first 2 were pretty good, and the last one displayed a pretty high amount of like creative burnout. There was still some solid stuff on there, but you could just tell it was kind of a lot of music to be dropping in one year. In my opinion, Future doesn't need to mature in the way that like a Jay-Z did, but I think that Future can still keep the same topics, just change a little bit of his perspective. Future is really good at evoking emotion in people, but I feel like he could do even more by rapping just a little bit more like an OG, like who not only is going through all this crazy toxic stuff, but has been going through it for a very long time now and spitting a little bit more of game on the effects and trying to like give some game and maybe even warn the listeners of his music about the lifestyle that he's living, which he does do at time in his music. It's not like he's never done that, but I think that he could make it a much bigger part of his game. And this is kind of a weird reference, but kind of like how Sugar Free does. If you know who Sugar Free is, then what I'm saying makes sense. Kind of giving game. Now, he doesn't have to speak like he's a pimp like Sugar Free, but a veteran in the game explaining that he's seen all this stuff a bunch of times and how it affects him seeing it a whole bunch and how you can avoid the same things or just something of the sort where he gives a little bit more perspective as like a veteran in the game. I don't want to see Future mature like a Jay-Z or a Nas, even though that probably would never happen anyway. But I think the biggest issue with having this conversation or this talk or, even questioning, does Future need to mature in his music, is the fact that it works, right? Like, how can you tell somebody to mature? How can you tell somebody to change when what he's doing still works? If anything, over the last few years or so, Future has peaked in terms of numbers and popularity. Like, he's just continued to get bigger. So, like, it's kind of a hard question to have. It's kind of a hard conversation to have when what he's doing is still working. I think the biggest conclusion that I can really bring from this conversation, more than anything, is that Future really is an anomaly in rap. Like, very rarely, I think he's really the only one that can stay relevant in these spaces of like kind of like generic rap themes, turn up music, club music, young adult party music. Very rarely can you stay in that space for as long as Future has while still being very relevant. More times than not, these club rappers have a shelf life of like maybe 5 years or so. And then, like, as the 20-year-olds become 25-year-olds and the 25-year-olds become 30 and 30, and so you get what I'm saying. As the age demographics kind of change in terms of the people that exist in them, typically the rappers recycle as well. But Future has been a constant in this space for 15 years. A space that's, rapping about very generic rap stuff, turn up club music. And I think that that's very impressive. Even if you want to paint the picture as like Future's immature, he needs to grow up, he needs to change. Yeah, those are probably fair points to have. But to see somebody occupy the club space as a very relevant player 15 years later is very impressive, no matter how you want to slice it. Future has a Hall of Fame spot in club and party music. I still think he can mature a bit, but that's just not his role, really. Future is the proverbial devil on your shoulder that is telling you how great all the toxic extremities of life can be. I don't want him to be super insightful and intuitive, so while it might be unfair for people to say Drake needs to mature, but not Future, I think the reasoning is that Future isn't the lyricist and the rapper that Drake is. So that comes with different expectations. Like Drake is mentioned in conversations with, Jay-Z and Kendrick and J. Cole and these guys that are held to a standard of excellence that expects a level of aging and wisdom that is typically expressed by all-time great lyricists and rappers. So in conclusion, some maturation from Future would be nice, but I think that role as the toxic lover boy, drug abusing, flexing 40-year-old rapper just works for Future in a way that literally nobody else could get it to work. Because if anybody else was Future's age acting like Future, they would just be laughed out the building. They would be clowned. People would be like, bro, grow up. How old is dude? Like, you're 40 acting like this. But for Future, it just kind of works. So as much as I would like to see some maturation in his lyrics, I don't know how much I can really point the finger and say he needs to do it, because he's having better years than he's ever had. His years from 2022 to 2024 were bigger than his years from 2012 to 2014. So it's like, how much can I say you really need to change? You need to do this when everything that he's doing is still working. Now, again, I just think that if literally anybody else was acting and rapping like Future was, it would just be called corny. And maybe that day does come for Future. Maybe 2 years down the line, everyone on the internet just turns their back on Future and starts pointing the finger and saying he needs to grow up and you still 40 acting like this. And that's a realistic possibility because you can never really predict where the internet's going to go. But at the moment, I would like to see him mature, but it's kind of hard to expect him to when everything he's doing still works. But if you agree, if you disagree, if you made it this far in the video, I greatly appreciate it. Make sure you leave me a comment down below telling me what you think about this about this video, about this topic. Regardless if you made it this far, I greatly, greatly appreciate you. Make sure you have a good day. Be safe, be blessed. I go by the name of Pay. Peace.